Okay, so as a little follow-up to yesterday's video where we were just looking at the datamined abilities, we've actually managed to get a talent tree now, as it's looking at the moment for Legion. Now, this first of all means we actually know which are talents and which are actual abilities. We were guessing a little bit yesterday, and we also know which ones will compete with each other. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go through these really quickly, just to show which ones we do compete with each other. Then I'll go through in a bit more detail about which we might use in certain situations. So the level 15 set, it's the same number of sets. We'll notice we haven't got an extra one because remember the extra talents we're effectively getting in Legion are tied to our artifact. They're the ones we're going on artifact, so there are no extra rows here. So execution sentence in the first row, which just does what execution sentence does. That's no real difference. Ultimately, to shorter range by the looks of it. Terralian's Might, this is the one that was Might of Lothar to begin with, which is our sort of chargey type thing, where we fling a holy sword there. That does a certain amount of damage, AoE damage, and then we can charge to it if we use the ability again. But that removes Hand of Hindrance. I'm not sure it actually says that there, but it certainly did. So unless that's changed, I am just seeing here, it doesn't say replaces Hand of Hindrance unless I'm missing it. Maybe they've changed it, or maybe not, it's just not saying it there. And then the other one is Consecration. We could get, hold on a minute, something's not quite right here, is it? Again, these are still based off data mined things rather than what's in game. It says here Consecration requires Paladin Holy Protection. We're definitely, definitely on the Retribution one. That's a little strange. Oh, I see. Blade of Light, hold on. Okay, this may or may not be correct then, looking at it. There are, you have to bear in mind, before I move on here, there are these abilities. Say we're not going into the game. This is not from people in beta. Any few number of people in beta, I gather, are not allowed to say anything anyway. So this is purely based off like data mined information. All right, so we're not too sure about that one. This one, Fires of Justice. This is the one. This is the one that affects our Crusader Strike. Remember, there's a lot of talents that just straight up change our core abilities depending on situations. So this one just increases our Crusader Strike damage. This one is the one with charges. You know, so in potentially I think what you could use this for is controlling your holy power generation from Crusader Strike. Potential. I mean, there's perhaps it's difficult to say because we don't know what the fights are going to be like there. But if we think about it in terms of the fights we're doing at the moment, say Manaroth or Cornrock or something like that, where you've got some imps or some ads coming in that need to be AoE down, you need to build up your holy power. You can just use your charges here really quickly, and at other times just use Crusader Strike when it's off cooldown as normal. So I think that's a control one, and this one was, so it's like single target, you would take this one, mostly single target with something else, you would take this one. Zeal, this is the one that looks like it makes our Crusader Strike cleave. What we don't yet know at the moment is what causes the stacks to increase. It could just be time. But I don't know, and I don't know how far it stacks up, of course. You know, it might be that you use Zeal and then every second you get a stack up to, say, 3 stacks or something like that. I don't know. Obviously, this one, they're not giving us enough information here. We need to look at the Retribution bit at the bottom there, down there, by the way. Instant Strike that causes 100% of holy, weapon damage. Physical damage and grants Holy Power. Grant Zeal, increasing your attack speed by 20%. Now, I did mention yesterday I didn't think this would go with the other attack speed buff one, but obviously you can get a right attack speed bonus. And causes Zeal to change to additional nearby target stack. We don't fully understand exactly how this ability works, but it sounds like the one you would use in an AoE or cleave type situation. So you would replace it for that. So it looks like straight up single target, you'd probably go for this. In a situation where you might need to build up holy power very quickly, but perhaps reactively, maybe even, so you can't even time it too well. Maybe this one. And then this one for where there's going to be a significant amount of cleave or AoE, is my guess. Fist of Justice, this is much like we've got now. Repentance, Fist of Justice, Blinding Light, all in the same one, just as we have for live. The only difference is that Fist of Justice has an extra little thing there where we can reduce the cooldown of it. Your spells that consume holy power reduce the remaining cooldown on Hammer of Justice by 10 seconds. Well, you use those all the time. So this is probably meaning that our stuns can be used a lot. A lot. Now, this has interesting PvP applications. I don't want to talk too much about PvP because I'm not a PvP player and I risk severely talking rubbish. But people have talked very much about closers. Well, you know, this effectively is as good. If you can use your stuns more often, then you don't need to close so much because you can just stand the person you're chasing after, very, very quickly. So, although PvP have got their own sort of set of talents, PvP players, this one I would say has got a good PvP use. Also for dungeons, really good. Raids, again, it depends on the fights. If we have to do a lot of stunning, maybe. Otherwise, not so much. And then these two, which you very rarely use, do you? Now, next one, Virtue's Blade. This is the one that replaces or modifies in some way Blade of Justice, which is the new ability we get, which gives us the 2 holy power. So this one is just the one that straight up increases the damage done by Blade of Justice, which remember has a 12-second cooldown. This one replaces it and it has a 6-second cooldown, and will do more than half of what a Blade of Justice does, but exactly half of what a Virtue's Blade of Justice does. Remember, I mean, Blade of Justice in its core form you're never going to use once you get, I mean, as you level up potentially, but you're never going to use it, are you? Because you're going to use one of these talents. All of these talents modify it in some way. So your Blade of Justice will either, you know, do that, or it will do this, which is half the damage and half the holy power generation, but also half the cooldown, so use twice as many. But also, it'll mean you can potentially get more conviction procs, because the conviction proc is a flat 20% rate, as far as we can tell, unless that changes. So you can get twice as many of those in it. But this one, again, if you've got a really busy rotation, maybe with haste, if you end up with a lot of haste, maybe this one could work out better. But both of these would be for single target type situations. Neither one is much use in itself for AoE. And then this is the AoE one, replace your Blade of Justice. This is your Divine Hammers spinning around the Paladin, damaging enemies within 8 yards for 40% of weapon damage. Holy damage instantly and every 2 seconds for 8 seconds generates a holy power. So it's a shorter cooldown than Blade of Justice, longer one than your Blade of Wrath, but it's obviously if you're an AoE fight, you are going to take that one. There's no argument about that. The holy power rate will be a little less than with these two. Okay. Then the one that affects judgments. So Judgments of the Bold increases the damage bonus. Now, when I was going through the abilities yesterday, I'd completely forgotten what the effect of Judgment was. And of course, what it does is it increases your damage by 30%. Or it puts a debuff on enemies to increase the amount of damage to take from you, about holy damage, I think it was. Keep forgetting again. So this one, just increases that benefit. So instead of 30% extra damage, it's 33% extra damage. This one causes your Judgment. I'd completely forgotten again yesterday. Judgment actually in Legion doesn't generate holy power. It just really applies that debuff and does a bit of damage. But this one will allow it to generate holy power. And this one is the one that causes it to affect all enemies within 8 yards and increase the duration. Now here was the thing. The duration of the buff was going to be about half of the cooldown of Judgment. Obviously, Judgment cooldown will come down with your haste, so it's difficult to tell exactly. But by increasing the duration by 100%, you'll be able to keep this debuff up, you would think, 100% of the time, as long as you can use Judgment a lot, and you would use Judgment a lot. It would basically be your highest priority, really. Holy power generator. Well, it wouldn't be a holy power generator, I should say, but non-finisher. And the fact that it'll, you know, if you've got ads groups for dungeons, this will be blinding, absolutely blinding. And imagine this with like your divine hammer, and then also, you know, you're putting in your divine storms and all the rest of it. You'd be able to carve through things, wouldn't you? Then the level 90 row, quick and powerful heal. This is the one that replaces your flash of light, does more healing than flash of light. Divine steed summons your holy charge. Oh my goodness, this is straight out of Diablo. This is how... Oh dear. Summons your holy charger to ride... I didn't even see this yesterday. To ride for 4 seconds, increasing movement speed by 100%. So movement speed increase, usable while indoors or in combat. So just move a short burst movement speed increase. But by 100%, this is a hell of a burst. And then eye for an eye. This is your... You would think the one you take for PvP. Instantly counterattack any enemy. Strikes you in melee for 12 seconds. So if someone tries sort of kiting you away, that's not going to work out too well for them. Yeah, but PvP, I don't see much benefit for that in certain raids. Dungeons maybe a little, but again shouldn't be really, because they shouldn't be attacking you in melee. A bit of solo, maybe you'd use it for solo stuff. So maybe you'd use that instead. I don't know. I think that's just PvP talent. Then the final ones, we've got Final Verdict. That just buffs our Templar's Verdict. Seal of Light, which is the one that increases our attack speed and movement speed. Last 30 seconds. It's like the old Inquisition. It's going to use 3 holy power, and we're going to need to use it every 30 seconds. You would think we're going to keep this up for all the time. This is going to be a maintenance buff. And then Holy Wrath fires holy bolts at the target, causing blah 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 holy damage and restoring some of your health over a very short duration. Deals 50% additional damage to stun targets. So again, situational. These ones you would just it'll be interesting to note which is the better overall damage between these two. It might depend on your gear. It might be a bit like now when you're talking about Seraphim or Final Verdict. For some fights, it sort of depends on the balance of your gear, the quality of your weapon compared to everything else. And this one is just straight up defensive ability. And I'll tell you an interesting thing as well. I don't see in here, and I ought to remember the names of these things. I should have had them separately. There was an absorb shield that was in the datamined information yesterday, which isn't here, which suggests that it might be a core ability. So there might be some core abilities. In fact, we can look down here because this indicates what core abilities are, but I don't see it there either. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to... Oh, specialization spell, class abilities. That's just for everyone. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to end this one here. So we've had a look at these. You can see the URL there yourself for finding these talent calculators and have a play about yourself. And I'm going to come back. I'm going to compare it to the abilities we were looking at yesterday and see what else we can find. So I'll see you in, well, from your point of view, 1 second, but from my point of view, a few minutes. Okay, so well, I'm just going to go down here. It actually was in this list. I'm going to go down and look at all the sort of core abilities that Retribution will get. Some of them are just the same as we've always had, so we can skip over those and we'll look at some of the new ones, because this is now very interesting. The more I look at the abilities we're getting, the more I am very positive about it. With the exception, and I'm always going to go on about this, about the fact unless they're going to take it off other DPS, I do think we need a raid-wide cooldown for something, whether it's damage reduction or damage increase or something that gets us our raid spot. Because the only way we're going to get raids, and I don't mean like individual people, I mean I will find a raid spot somewhere, and so will a lot of other people. But in terms of, you know, generally speaking, Retribution Paladins in raids, then unless you do loads more damage than anyone else, and they're never going to make us do loads more damage than anyone else, you've got to at least be able to compete on utility as well as damage. But anyway, that's aside. So let's have a look through. So also you'll notice some of these abilities that are current at the moment we're getting at different levels. That's what we bought before, but we don't care about that, because if you're watching this, it's very likely you've got a level 100 Retribution Paladin, so you're only worried about the next 10 levels, and you can have a look here. None of these are given out after level 100 anyway, so there. we're going to get all these when the pre-Legion patch hits. So Hammer of Justice, Flash of Light just do what they do. Templar's Verdict, same thing. Sword of Light, same thing. It's just the thing they use to tune our damage and to stop us using a sword and shield. Notice we've got the Ashbringer icon for this one. Hand of Light. So this is one that I thought, you know, is core ability. It's a little defensive, really. It's a little self-heal beyond Flash of Light. So places a hand on an enemy target, healing you for 3% each time the target takes damage, up to once per second. If the target dies with the hand active, you'll heal for 40%. I was saying yesterday, okay, so if this carries on for 10 seconds and you're absolutely battering something, or there's a group of you battering it, because it doesn't say that you have to damage it, it just takes damage. So if you're in a group or something like that, if it lasts for the full 10 seconds, then that's healing for 30%. Or if it dies, it heals for 40%. And I said yesterday, I was quite wrong, obviously, between 30 and 40% healing this is done. It's quite wrong, of course. It could go for 9 seconds, giving you 27%, and then it could die after 9 seconds, and you're actually getting about 67% healing out of it. So it could do a lot of healing. This is really, if you're in a dungeon situation, you find yourself with taking a lot of damage. This could be excellent. Sorry, I'm looking on the wrong one again. It's used every 60 seconds though, so you can't spam it, but you could use it reasonably regularly, even in a raid situation. Let's say let's say it's one of those things where there's a lot of raid damage going out. So let's say Gorfiend during Feast of Souls. When you've got the weakest raid defensive cooldown up, you could be using that. So yeah, Blade of Justice, of course, we know about, which is not an ability we're going to be using because we use this row to modify it. So it's actually going to be one of these three. But Blade of Justice in its form, but dealing more damage if we use that. Hand of Hindrance is just the snare, 30-second cooldown, so we can use that reasonably often. And from PvP's point of view, who might think, well, that's every 30 seconds isn't very good. I want my Judgment of Justice. Just remember, you could get Fist of Justice talent, and as long as you're using Holy Power finishers, you're actually able to reduce the cooldown on that stun, so you can actually stun very frequently. So, and that's as good as better than a snare, in fact, isn't it? So fewer people can get out of stuns than snares as well, can't they? I'm not sure when it comes to PvP. Then Shield of Vengeance. This is the one I was looking for. This is our little absorb that is core. It's a core ability. It's not a talent. I thought it'd be a talent. So creates a barrier of holy light that absorbs, an amount of damage based on our attack power for 15 seconds. When the barrier is consumed or expires, all damage absorbed is dealt back to your current melee target. So we need to track this, of course, to sort of know when it's likely to go off, to make sure we're in melee range of something. Mind you, it says current melee target. Does that mean you have to be in melee range? You would think so. You would think so, otherwise it would just say target, wouldn't it? So presumably you've got to be targeted. It's no good just being in melee range of something, and it's no good just targeting something. You've got to have both, I would guess. Divine Storm is just Divine Storm. We don't know how much damage it's going to do. Rebuke is just Rebuke. Blessing of Protection. Note the distinction here to our current one. Places a blessing on a party or raid member, protecting them from all physical attacks for 10 seconds. You will notice it does not prevent them attacking themselves. So you can't do this anymore on known warriors in execute range to piss them off. Because you can do this on a warrior and they'll still be able to attack. You're just protecting them. So it has no trolling value anymore. Plate specialization, blah, blah, blah. Retribution. This is a core ability, so it's not a talent. I thought it might be a talent. So when a party or raid member within 40 yards dies, you gain 100% increased damage for 10 seconds. Again, it's a really weird one. I've mentioned this yesterday. I'm not going to go over that again. Avenging Wrath. Increases all damage and healing caused by 50% for 20 seconds. Do you know what? I thought this yesterday. I was reading this yesterday, and I actually cut it out of the video because I thought, no, this isn't right. I'm reading for the wrong spec or something. But it is. Increases all damage and healing by 50% for 20 seconds. Whereas it's 20% at the moment. So that's a much heftier buff. 2-minute cooldown still. I thought someone was mentioning it might be going down to 1.5. But it's still 2 minutes at that point. Just word of caution, of course, this is all data mined information. Some of these spells either might be going, but they're just still in. You know, the data mine stuff can include stuff that Blizzard are planning to get rid of or tidy up and they haven't quite yet. But this is a change, so it's probably intended. So that's a very hefty cooldown for Avenging Wrath now. It becomes a much bigger one, much bigger than it is at the moment. Maybe it's going back to the old days where at the start of a fight you'll I remember like certainly at the beginning of MOP where you would go in all guns blazing, Avenging Wrath and all the rest of it. You'd be shooting to the top of the damage meters and by some distance, and then what would happen is people would slowly start to, once your Avenging Wrath went off you were useless. So people would catch up and blah blah blah. Then it would come off cooldown again and you start going ahead, and it was just this ebb and flow, which sort of exists a little bit now, not so much. This is probably going to cause that again. But of course I haven't looked at the other specs. I don't know. Other DPS may be getting beefier cooldowns as well. I don't know. Mastery is our mastery, of course. So it affects Crusader Strike, Blade of Justice, Divine Storm and Templar's Verdict. Doing extra holy damage with those. And then Conviction, which is the one I've been moaning about. But again, see what I don't notice in here is the passive that will basically tell us how much holy power we can store. If we can store more than 5 holy power, I have less of a problem with Conviction. Although the concept of RNG holy power generation is always going to be a bone of contention. But if we can store more than 5 holy power, less of an issue. Coming back to the talents that we've got, I mean, so what might we look at? I mean, the consecration is the weird one because looking at the tooltip, it's not telling us that this is for Retribution, but it is in the Retribution talent calculator here. But it could work. I mean, it's like execution sentences for your single target fights, consecration for your AoE fight. So instead of Light's Hammer, consecration, absolutely fine. And Tyrallian's Might is your utility ability, which also does some AoE. What's the cooldown of Consecrate? 9 seconds, and it lasts 9 seconds. You keep this 100% of the time. I'm just trying to see. I can't see a resource cost. So it doesn't look like it uses holy power, which is just as well, because I don't think I'd use it if it did. Or I suppose we would in some situations. And I don't see a mana cost either, so it's not like when Red used to have Consecration, in which case it would cost a considerable amount of mana, which would make you think twice about using it when you didn't absolutely have to. But anyway, these ones, obviously the Crusader Strike. I mean, I've just been through when we'd use each of these ones. I would look this as straightforward single target fight, bang. In fact, let's look at single target fight. Would go bang, bang. We'd always have that. That's you're not going to use them unless there is something in the fight for which they're going to be useful. I'm looking at this from a raiding point of view. Remember, Virtue's Blade. Not sure actually which one I would go with between those two. Situations where you could use either, but I'm just going to say probably that one. Judgments of the Bold. I'm thinking. See, this Mass Judgment, even for single target, looks interesting, because of the fact that it increases the duration, so you can keep this duration up all the time. But again, I don't know how much the downtime is going to be, because Judgment, the cooldown of Judgment presumably will be affected by haste. And I don't know how much haste we're going to be getting. So this is completely up in the air as to how useful each of these ones are. So I'm going to say I don't know on these ones. We need to see. For now, I'll just put that. I will get some holy power out of it. Blaze of Light is the heal. They're giving yourself a better self-heal, especially as it's got a cast time. There is no selfless healer thing that'll reduce that to an instant cast or anything like that. So I'm going to say we're probably not going to go for that. Divine Steed, maybe, but probably not that. So you're probably talking this one, your speed boost. For the Light Fist of Justice, I'm going to say that this is, in almost all cases, going to be the one you take. I can't really think of any realistic raiding situation where you take anything else. But you never know. Final Verdict. Maybe I was going to say maybe you have to off tank and add, but then we're not having taunt in Legion, so yeah. Final verdict for single target, you'd probably think, but again, it depends which one's going to do more damage, and does it matter on the relative quality of your weapon compared to the rest of the gear between these two? It's certainly not going to be this one. I don't know. This we need to have a look at numbers on this one, don't we? We need some theory crafting. I'm not a theory crafter. I just look at these things and make stuff up. I'd find it strange that this wouldn't be a better one, though. But then that is attack speed increase and not haste increase. It would be very powerful if it was haste. So we'll just go guessing on that one. Then if we reset it, let's look at some AoE type situations. So we're probably going to go Consecrate. We're not going to have that. We're not going to have that. We're going to have Zeal. Obviously we're going to have that. I'm going to put that down as well. Virtue's Blade. So Divine Hammer. It's straightforward for AoE. Obviously we're going to have that for AoE as well. And for this one. See, again, it depends. If this actually does a good amount of damage for the 3 Holy Power, if it's an actually good damage ability on its own without the heal, then obviously would go for this. If not, you'd go for this, because this is beneficial for AoE as well as single target, because it increases your attack speed, which is beneficial for any mode. So I'm going to go for that again. I'm going to say that's going to be quite a useful one. So we're looking at that. And then the way we might change some of these, Zeal, as I say, if we're going to have mostly single target but with some AoE, especially where we have to be a bit reactive, maybe we go for this, if that works as I'm thinking it will work. I'm just trying to see now. But it's fun, isn't it fun playing with talent calculators? So those are the sort of things we could be looking at just from point of view of now. But there are some unknowns. We need some proper theory crafting to see in a normal fight situation which of these two is going to give us the most overall benefit. I mean, if it can't be this in all situations, because then why would this talent even exist? Of course, numbers are still to be tuned, and they will be tuned dozens of times, absolutely guaranteed. And if it's anything like the previous couple of betas, they're going to be doing all the boss testing before they even do the class tuning. So who knows really. But there we go, there's an update. Don't get used to these every day, but as soon as there is significant amounts of new information, and this is very significant compared to yesterday, I will do another video again with my thoughts on that. But until then,